Search teams are scouring the overflowing Guadalupe River in Texas, looking for anyone who could have been swept away in flash floods. The National Weather Service noted the Guadalupe River recorded a 6.7 meter rise in 2 hours due to heavy rainfall.
On July 4th, 2025, the Guadalupe River in Texas rose 26 feet in under an hour. It drowned 135 people, including children asleep at summer camp. 4 months of rain, dumped in 4 hours. 2 days earlier, NASA engineers had seeded clouds directly above that same stretch of river. They released silver iodide to trigger rainfall, a drought relief trick they'd pulled off hundreds of times before. Every scientist says the seeding had nothing to do with the flood. But 3 months later, the rain still won't stop. The silver iodide NASA released is doing something in those clouds that's never been seen before. And nobody knows how to make it stop. For 70 years, NASA has been testing machines that make it rain. These aren't science experiments hidden in bunkers. They're real devices, operating across Texas, Colorado, Wyoming, and 6 other states. The technology is documented in government reports anyone can read. NASA's research centers in Virginia and Alabama have been perfecting ways to pull rain from clouds since before most people watching this were born. Planes fly into clouds and release tiny particles of silver iodide, crystals smaller than a grain of sand. Water in the clouds sticks to these particles, forms drops heavy enough to fall, and you get rain. It's called cloud seeding. It's been done thousands of times across America with no major problems. The process usually boosts rainfall by about 10 to 15%. Useful during droughts, but nothing dramatic. Texas has been doing this since the 1950s. 6 different weather programs operate across the state, covering an area the size of South Carolina. They've seeded clouds over 31 million acres of Texas land. Every operation gets logged. Every chemical released gets tracked. For decades, it worked exactly as predicted. Seed the clouds, get a bit more rain, everything returns to normal within hours. Then came 2023. Texas went through one of the worst droughts in state history. Reservoirs dropped to record lows. Crops died in fields. Cities ran out of water. The state poured money into weather programs and told them to try new approaches. NASA contractors brought in the upgrade. The new system added 3 things. First, AI computers that analyze weather in real time and calculate exactly where to release the silver iodide for maximum effect. Second, autonomous drones that can fly seeding missions with precision human pilots can't match. Third, and this is where things get interesting, equipment on the ground that shoots electrical pulses into the sky to charge the air and make clouds produce even more rain. Engineers called it atmospheric ionization. The idea was simple. Electrically charge the atmosphere while you seed clouds, and you can double or triple the amount of rain you pull down. They'd tested it in labs. Computer models said it was safe. The electrical pulses would shut off, the silver iodide would rain out within a few hours, and weather would go back to normal, just like it always had, for 70 years. Between May and June 2025, they ran 12 tests using the full system in South Texas. AI planning, drone dispersal, silver iodide, and electrical pulses all working together. Every test followed the same pattern. Seed the clouds, measure the rain, watch everything return to normal. It worked perfectly. The engineers were confident they'd created a better way to fight droughts. Then, they ran test number 13 over Central Texas. Something went wrong. That morning looks like a perfect day to make it rain. Weather conditions over Central Texas were exactly what the AI system flagged as ideal. Clouds were building, moisture was coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, natural rain was expected. Maybe half an inch, maybe an inch at most. Exactly the kind of marginal weather system that cloud seeding works best on. At 2:17 in the afternoon, 3 drones took off from a facility near San Antonio. Each one carried containers of silver iodide mixed with acetone to help spread the particles through the air. The AI had mapped out a flight path following the Guadalupe River Valley for 60 miles, hitting spots where conditions looked most promising. At the same time, equipment on the ground at 3 different locations started sending electrical pulses into the sky above the target area. The operation ran for 4 hours. The drones released 180 pounds of silver iodide across the zone. The ground equipment pulsed electricity into the atmosphere at intervals the AI calculated would maximize rain without causing problems. By 6:15 p.m., the drones came back. By 6:30, the electrical equipment shut down. Mission logs showed light rain across the area, about 1.5 inches total, 20% more than the forecast. Another successful test. That evening, sensors picked up something odd. The electrical charge in the atmosphere was still elevated 90 minutes after the equipment turned off. In previous tests, the charge always dropped back to normal within half an hour. Engineers looked at the data and figured it was probably a sensor glitch or just natural variation in the atmosphere. The AI didn't flag anything as dangerous. Everything seemed fine. But something was happening in the sky that nobody's instruments were designed to detect. The silver iodide particles weren't behaving the way they had in previous tests. The electrical pulses had changed them somehow. Instead of just attracting water like they normally do, these particles were pulling in other particles from the natural atmosphere and creating new structures that were even better at making rain. These new structures weren't breaking down after a few hours like regular silver iodide does. They were staying active and spreading. By midnight, these supercharged rain-making particles had drifted across 200 square miles, carried by winds in the upper atmosphere. They were pulling moisture out of the air with 3 times the efficiency of normal cloud seeding. Weather radar showed clouds getting thicker over the region. Forecasters noticed rain chances were going up for the next 2 days, but they assumed it was just the natural weather system developing. Nobody connected it to what had happened 12 hours earlier. 6 miles southwest of a town called Hunt, 750 girls were sleeping at Camp Mystic that night. The camp sits right on the bank of the Guadalupe River, directly in the center of where those particles were concentrating. The camp director checked the weather forecast before going to bed. 60% chance of rain the next day, maybe 2 inches. Nothing alarming for July in Texas. The camp had flood procedures, but the forecast didn't look like anything that needed special preparation. What the forecast couldn't show was that the storm building overhead wasn't a normal Texas thunderstorm anymore. It was something new, something created by chemistry that had never existed on Earth before. And in 48 hours, it was going to kill 135 people. Rain started falling around 10 p.m. the next night. Steady, but not alarming. By 1:14 a.m. on July 4th, weather radar showed the rain intensifying fast. The National Weather Service issued flash flood warnings. At 5:15 a.m., the Guadalupe River at Kerrville measured just under 2 feet deep. 90 minutes later, it measured 34 feet. The river rose more than 30 feet in an hour and a half. At Camp Mystic, water began entering the lower cabins around 4 a.m. Counselors woke the campers and moved everyone uphill following emergency procedures. The camp sits on sloped ground with plenty of elevation from the river to the main buildings. Moving uphill should have been enough. Every flood in the river's history would have been stopped by that much elevation. But this wasn't a normal flood. The rain wouldn't stop. It fell at 3 inches per hour. Hurricane-level rainfall over ground that had been in severe drought for 2 years. The soil couldn't absorb anything. Every drop became runoff, pouring into the Guadalupe River. By 7:24 a.m., the Weather Service sent out a warning nobody had ever written before. A large and deadly flood wave is moving down the Guadalupe River. The wave hit Camp Mystic with water traveling 15 to 20 miles per hour. Buildings near the river were obliterated. Dick Eastland, who'd run the camp for 51 years, died trying to reach the cabins where the youngest children were trapped. 27 people from Camp Mystic were killed. 25 of them were children, between 7 and 13 years old. Up and down the river, RV parks and vacation cabins were destroyed. Families celebrating the 4th of July were swept away. Across the county, 117 people died. In 6 hours, some areas received 20 inches of rain. The Weather Service calculated this was a once-in-a-thousand-year rainfall event. Except, meteorologists couldn't explain why the storm had stalled in one place for 8 hours, why it produced rainfall at hurricane intensities without a hurricane, or why it concentrated so precisely over one specific river valley. The next day, while rescue teams searched for survivors, someone checked the weather modification logs. The storm had stalled in the exact same spot where they'd seeded clouds 48 hours earlier. 3 months after July 4th, it's still raining over central Texas. Not catastrophic flooding every day, but constant, relentless precipitation that won't stop. October is normally one of the driest months in Texas. This October has already recorded more than 4 times the normal rainfall, with more coming every week. The Guadalupe River should be low by now. Every fall, the river drops to a trickle as Texas heat dries everything out. This year, the river has stayed at or above flood stage continuously since July. People who survived the disaster are evacuating their homes over and over as the river keeps rising. Dr. Katja Friedrich studies cloud seeding at the University of Colorado. In September, her team deployed equipment over central Texas to measure what's happening in the atmosphere. What they found shouldn't exist. Silver iodide levels hundreds of times higher than any seeding operation should produce. And the particles are still active, still pulling rain from clouds, 3 months after they were released. The particles should have disappeared months ago. In normal cloud seeding, silver iodide rains out within a few hours. These particles aren't just staying in the atmosphere. They're creating more particles from the natural atmosphere around them. Every rain event creates conditions for the next rain event, a loop feeding itself. NASA's weather team has run nearly 1,000 computer simulations trying to figure out what's happening. The simulations all reach the same conclusion. The atmosphere above central Texas has been permanently changed. The region has become a machine that generates rain continuously, and nobody knows how to shut it off. They tried to fix it in September. Weather modification teams released chemicals designed to neutralize the silver iodide and force it out of the sky. They covered a massive area with thousands of pounds of treatment chemicals. Rain decreased slightly for 3 days, then went right back to where it was. The treatment removed some particles, but the remaining ones kept creating new ones faster than the chemicals could remove them. Insurance companies have paid out billions in flood claims. 5 major insurers announced they won't renew policies in the area. Property values have crashed, farms have shut down. You can't grow crops in fields that spend more time underwater than dry. Rebecca Martinez evacuated her home in Kerrville 6 times between July and October. Each time, floodwaters damaged more of the house her grandfather built in 1973. Her insurance company stopped paying after the 3rd claim. Martinez and her family gave up in October and moved away permanently, joining thousands of others fleeing the endless rain. Schools have lost students. Businesses are closing. Local governments are running out of money as people flee. Weather forecasts keep showing the same thing. Rain today, rain tomorrow, rain next week, rain next month. It just keeps raining over central Texas, and nobody has any idea how to make it stop. On August 12th, NASA sent a message to everyone working on their weather programs. All data from Texas operations between May and July needed to be classified. Information that had been published on NASA websites came down. Researchers were told any papers about Texas weather modification had to go through new approval processes. Dr. Sarah Chen works as an atmospheric chemist for NOAA. In September, she submitted a research paper documenting what she'd measured in central Texas. The paper showed the silver iodide levels, explained how the particles were staying active instead of breaking down, and detailed the feedback cycle creating continuous rain. The journal accepted her paper. 3 days later, the editor called to say the paper was being withdrawn at the request of federal research partners. No explanation given. Dr. Chen's career studying atmospheric chemistry suddenly hit a wall nobody would talk about. The South Texas Weather Modification Association keeps a public database of every seeding operation going back to 1997. The July 2nd mission appeared in that database for 6 weeks, showing all the normal details. In mid-August, the entry was replaced with a single, generic line. All the specific data disappeared. Texas law requires weather modification groups to file detailed reports within 30 days of each operation. Those reports are public records. Multiple journalists requested the July 2nd report in August and September. The state responded that the report was under review. It's late October now. No report has been released. On July 10th, Texas regulators issued a statement saying the July 2nd operation seeded clouds 130 miles away from where the flooding happened. But flight logs later showed the drones operated much closer to the flood zone. The statement also said cloud seeding can only increase rain by 10 to 15%. That number comes from studies of old-style seeding, without electrical charging. Nobody has studied what happens when you combine the two, because Texas was the first place it was tried at full scale. Weather forecasters in Texas started receiving guidance in mid-August. Don't speculate about connections between seeding and flooding. Travis Herzog, a meteorologist in Houston, mentioned cloud seeding once on air while explaining why conspiracy theories were wrong. His station management told him not to discuss weather modification again. Herzog agreed, but later told colleagues he wasn't comfortable being told what weather topics he couldn't talk about. The conspiracy theories spreading online are wrong about weather warfare and intentional killing, but the atmospheric data shows something nobody wants to admit. The flood and the seeding are connected by chemistry. The silver iodide particles are measurable. Their effect on rainfall is documented. The location of persistent rain matches exactly where the seeding operation released materials. By late October, no government scientist or NASA contractor will discuss Texas weather operations on record. The official position hasn't changed. The July 4th flood was natural weather, made worse by climate change. Cloud seeding had nothing to do with it. The ongoing rain is unfortunate but unrelated. But if cloud seeding had nothing to do with it, why classify all the data? Why pull research papers? Why scrub databases? Why silence meteorologists? The cover-up suggests someone knows exactly what happened and doesn't want anyone else to figure it out. Weather modification isn't just happening in Texas. At least 50 countries run programs that seed clouds to make rain. China operates the biggest program on Earth, covering an area larger than Alaska. The United Arab Emirates spends millions making rain in the desert. India runs programs in drought regions. Australia has been seeding clouds continuously since the 1960s. Programs operate across the American West. Most of these programs use old methods that have run thousands of times with no major incidents. The Texas situation revealed something nobody wanted to know. 70 years of safe operations don't guarantee that new technology won't trigger something nobody predicted. AI optimization, electrical charging, autonomous drones combined with traditional seeding created reactions that didn't exist in any model. China just announced plans to expand weather modification using AI and electrical charging systems similar to what was tested in Texas. The UAE is investing in the same technology. If these programs trigger the same chemical loop happening in Texas, the consequences could affect billions of people. A self-sustaining rain system over the Gobi Desert or Arabian Peninsula could alter climate patterns across entire continents. The Texas case revealed something worse. Once you change atmospheric chemistry, you might not be able to change it back. Engineers designed systems to turn rain on. They assumed nature would turn rain off when operations stopped. 5 months later, the chemical loop continues. Attempts to neutralize it failed. The particles create more copies of themselves. Unless someone discovers a solution nobody has thought of yet, Central Texas will keep getting excessive rain indefinitely. Maybe forever. The death toll from weather incidents in Central Texas since July 4th has reached 163 people. The economic cost exceeds $6 billion. More than 12,000 people have permanently left flood-affected areas. Communities that existed for 150 years are being abandoned. Dr. Michael Torres led NASA's weather program. He resigned in mid-October. In his exit memo that was later leaked, he wrote that the team had assumed they understood atmospheric chemistry well enough to safely modify weather. They were wrong. Texas proves that weather modification at scale carries risks nobody can predict. The program built controls to turn rain on, but never built controls to turn rain off. Torres wrote that continuing weather programs anywhere without understanding why Texas failed isn't engineering. It's gambling with systems that billions of people depend on for survival. Weather programs in Colorado and Wyoming suspended operations after Texas. California stopped all electrical charging research. The Texas Weather Modification Association hasn't conducted any operations since July 2nd, but programs in other countries continue operating, most planning to add the same technologies that failed in Texas. The question isn't whether humans can make it rain. We've done that since 1946. The question is, what happens when we make it rain in ways we don't fully understand, in places we can't control, creating chemistry that's never existed before? It's November 2025. The rain over central Texas shows no sign of stopping. Weather models project above normal rainfall continuing through next year. The silver iodide levels in the atmosphere remain stable. The chemical loop isn't weakening. Engineers created a system to make it rain over Texas. 5 months later, they still haven't figured out how to make it stop. And the terrifying part? They might never figure it out. You can't turn off a machine that has no off switch. You can't recall chemicals once they're in the sky. You can't undo chemistry that creates itself. NASA engineers tested a machine that controls weather, and now that machine controls them.